For lesson 2, we're talking about reference, which is an idea that is going to be more prevalent on the imperial side of things than it is on our metric side of things. So before our metric system existed and we were using the imperial system everywhere for feet, for inches, for all that, it was based on things that were available within the community or that you had readily available, frequently using parts of your body in order to do the measurements. So, I mean, it's a concept that you're going to have to know. It is going to come up on the test, but it's going to be not something that is as important as the other parts of this. You just need to understand the basic concept of it. So, before measuring tools were created, people often used common objects as an aid or point of reference in terms of measurements. We call them reference. To describe objects used as a point of reference in a measurement, below are some examples. So we could say that we did thumb widths. We could say that we did hand widths. We could say that it was the span of the hand when we spread out the fingers. A cubit is if you bend your elbow at a 90 degrees, then it's going to be the end of the elbow to the tip of your fingers. And then obviously paces were relatively prevalent, which is one full step. So I'm not going to make you read through all this. Don't worry about it. But when we're talking about which things that we would use in order to measure out, all you're thinking of is what would be a logical unit based on the size of the referent in order to measure out the size of whatever object you're talking about. If we're looking at the units on the top, the thumbs, the hand, the span, the cubit, or the pace, which of these would make sense given that we're trying to measure a football field? A football field we're going to do in paces. The length of a compact flash card, that is very tiny. We're going to do that in terms of how many thumb widths. And the height of a horse, we do in terms of hands or spans. Remembering that a span is just going to be a little bit bigger than what a hand is. Describe how you could determine an estimate of the perimeter of the base of a house using one of the above reference. Well, I'm going to add up the sum of all sides in paces. I would just walk around the house and then figure out how many paces was it adding up along all of the sides. For the imperial system, which is still most prevalent in America or the US, and we do have it in Canada because they're our biggest trading partner. So if you go to a lot of the grocery stores, or if you are going to like Home Depot because you're doing home renos, a lot of the stuff you will see will show up in terms of feet and inches and things like that. And a lot of us still measure our heights in terms of feet and inches. We don't know how many centimeters we are. So when we're doing the imperial system, then we're going to say that 1 foot is 12 inches, 1 yard is 3 feet, 1 mile is 1,760 yards, or 1 mile is the same as 5,280 feet. If we're using the metric system is based on a base 10 system, kind of like how we count. So 1 centimeter is 10 millimeters, 1 meter is 100 centimeters, 1 kilometer is 100 meters, which we pretty much all know at this point. If I'm using a referent to measure, referents are still used every day in measuring. One of the best ways to learn any measurement system is to relate a measurement to a reference. So if we're thinking about the width of a thumb across the joint, then that's going to be approximately 1 inch. The length of a adult male foot is going to be about 1 foot. Remember, it's always saying about because based on person to person. Some people will have smaller hands or smaller feet or whatever it happens to be, but for the most part, it's pretty close. It's within reason. And one adult pace is approximately 1 yard. If we're doing it for the standardized increments or the metric system, then the width of a fingernail is about 1 centimeter. The width of 5 toes is about a decimeter, or 10 centimeters. The thickness of a dime is about a millimeter. The average height of a 4-year-old is about 1 meter. So just keep a 4-year-old handy and you're good to go. The height of a standard doorway is about 2 meters. The width of this workbook is 20 centimeters. The diameter of your average CD, DVD, or Blu-ray is going to be 12 centimeters. And the length of the CFL football field is 100 meters. So, if we consider the task of estimating the length of a standard letter size paper, if we're identifying a referent which could be used to measure the length in SI units, then I'm going to say that if I'm doing it for the width of a letter, I'm probably going to use the width of a fingernail. Which approximates centimeters. If I'm doing one which could be used to measure the length in imperial units, well, if I'm using imperial units, then I'm probably going to go the width of the thumb across the joint. Which approximates an inch. If I'm saying I explain the process of measuring the length in imperial units, no, I'm not going to do that. Literally, just take your thumb and go one beside the other, beside the other, beside the other, beside the other to make your way across the paper. For example 4, describe and explain a personal strategy which could be used to determine the measurement of the circumference going all the way around the outside of a DVD using a metric unit. Then all I'm going to do is probably just put my pinky finger on one part, use my pinky from the other hand, and put it right beside it. And then I'm just going to do the same thing, continuing to go all the way around the CD and figure out how many approximately centimeters it is going to wind up being. Shown below is a 1/2 scale image of a banknote, in this case the Canadian $5 bill. If I measure the length of the bill in standard imperial, or sorry, not standard imperial, in the standardized increments and the imperial units, or metric and imperial units, then it's going to be, for the metric units, 7.6 centimeters, and for the imperial units, 3 inches. If I'm using this to figure out the actual length of the $5 bill, well, if this is a half scale one, then I would say that it's going to be 7.6 centimeters times 2, which means it would be 15.2 centimeters in real life. Or 3 inches times 2 is going to be 6 inches in real life. Could the length of an actual $5 bill or other Canadian banknotes be used as a reference in either system of measurement? Yeah, it could. It could be used to represent one-half a foot in the imperial units. So if you have dollar bills, $2 bills set side by side are basically 1 foot. Stacy was asked to provide a referent for 1 kilometer. She could not think of anything that was 1 kilometer in length, so she used a referent for a smaller measure to provide a referent for a kilometer. What is one possible way that she could have done this? A football field is 100 meters, so 10 football fields would be 1 kilometer. Done.